Thank you so much for joining us here on the Brain Possible podcast. I actually have not had anyone uh, come and speak about essential oils yet, but I have two authors kind of back to back, and you're the first one. So you get to be the first person to introduce all the goodness to us.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks for the privilege. It's a
Can you
lot of pressure on me.
Yeah. Well, I figure a lot of basics. Maybe a lot of the questions I have are pretty basic to you.
Yeah.
Um, First, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what brought you to this work? And why is working with essential oils one of your passions?
Yeah, for me, my healing story didn't include essential oils. I have my own healing story where I battled with chronic disease, everything from pain to gut issues, just chronic, low-grade infections that caused my parents when I was raised to get on a lot of antibiotics. They didn't know what else to do, right? So they just elected naturally, like a lot of parents did in the 80s and 90s. And I started to develop like significant mental health concerns like depression, anxiety. I even contemplated suicide at one season in my life. And I started to self medicate with narcotics and alcohol. And I was a wreck. I was
Mhm.
a wreck emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I had a spiritual epiphany and I became a Christian almost actually 18 years to the day that we're doing this podcast interview in March. And I was just blown away by number one, purpose. And for those people who are struggling and who isn't struggling with some sort of mental health issue at this point, like stress, anxiety, overwhelm, like going through the wake of the most arguably traumatic, possibly traumatic year of human existence in 2020. And we could look at why that was, how it was. Everyone's been affected at some point. That's why we see suicide skyrocket, domestic abuse skyrocket right now. And so, if that speaks to you, you know, you need hope. And that was really, you need hope, you need purpose, you need to feel valued. And so that all happened when I had my spiritual epiphany, and it dawned on me like I got to take care of myself. Like
Mhm.
I do reap what I sow, and I need to focus on what I eat, how I manage my fitness, what I put on my body when I'm breathing in, and all the dots started to connect. And so, long and the short of it, my own healing story really had nothing to do with essential oils at all.
Mhm.
And what hit me though is that when I got something, whether it was a bee sting, foot fungus, pimple, little ache or pain, like I had literally an empty medicine cabinet because I was so convinced at the time, because drugs have done so much harm in my life. I wanted to steer away from it as much as possible, that I literally just grinned and bared through all the symptoms of all the things. And I was still, I was doing good. I wasn't depressed anymore. I didn't have like leaky gut issues. I didn't have cystic acne. I didn't have chronic pain, but things come up. I mean, you're going to cut yourself once in a while, right? That's just life. And so that's really what hit me. That's really what made me realize I need a medicine cabinet. And around that same time, it's just how things work, right? There's no coincidence in life. I believe that is I was a medical writer at the time, and one of my clients commissioned me to write a series of public health reports on essential oils.
Hmm.
And so now was my job. It was like my job to read hundreds of research trials, to look at and try to put try to put substance to the wild claims that are online about essential oils curing everything but death. And so now I started looking at their effect of blood pressure, blood sugar, how it can balance your hormones, mental health, and I was just floored. I was like, whoa, this is the medicine cabinet I've been looking for the last several years. It was kind of like that moment, right? And I'm like the only dude. I was the only dude I knew doing this, because no joke, like let's call out the elephant in the room. Like a lot of guys, they don't want to smell foo-foo. Like I jest, but I'm not going to before now I do, but I was never going to put ylang ylang on and to help with anxiety and go play beach volleyball with my guy friends. They'll take my guy card away from me. Like it just doesn't work like that. And so I had to go over, I had to get beyond that stigma. And if for those men listening, we got to get beyond the stigma that it is okay and you can be masculine and be healthy. And the smells of nature specifically, and we'll talk hopefully a little bit about forest bathing and the tree oils and the citrus oils. Yeah, you don't have to smell like your wife, your partner, your spouse, your mom, your sister if you don't want to have clary sage and geranium on you. But I'll tell you though, when you're at home, you might want to use those because they can help.
Well, um, I don't know most of those oils that you just mentioned. I
Oh,
have,
fun.
dabbled, and I have like a few basics or maybe some blends, but I don't know about any of that. So, it does seem like essential oils are everywhere these days. You're right about that. It's if you Google it,
Oh, yeah.
thousands and thousands of articles will come up. So I'm interested in what you learned in your on that job. Um, and I also want to know how and why do you think they have become such a big part of modern life?
Their medicine. That's the same answer to both those questions. Their medicine. That's what hit me. That's what I learned. That was my takeaway.
Mhm.
When I was looking at the historical use of essential oils in World War I, World War II, combat medics, we're talking
Yeah.
the front lines of the war. They were using essential oils.
Oh,
They didn't
wow.
have what do you think they used to use before the antibiotic, right? And the antibiotic wasn't invented until the mid 40s.
Mhm.
So you had this, we're seeing a resurgence of drugs came. And again, thank God for medicine. Like no joke.
Yeah.
We got to put that out there for medicinal
For
needs.
penicillin.
Yeah, thank God for things like that. But the antibiotic isn't the solution every sniffle and every
No.
ache and pain. And that's what happened. And so for years, for centuries, since the beginning of time, our ancestors did very well with plant-based medicine. That's all that they had. And the perfect example is willow. I mean, we know for centuries, literally thousands of years, our ancestors used willow bark and they used to make salves out of it and poultices because there's a chemical in the salicylate family that's known as an analgesic. It's a painkiller. So it's an anti-inflammatory. It's a wonderful aroma. And again, people have been using it since the beginning of modern civilization to manage pain and inflammation. Well, when you extract some of those chemicals in the willow bark that we know have pain relieving properties, you synthetically manufacture it, slap a white shiny coating on it, you can call it aspirin. That's exactly what aspirin is.
Really?
And yes, and so it's like, okay, this makes sense now to me. And then the aha moment was, and I have a father-in-law who's a PhD chemist. My sister-in-law is a PhD chemist. I mean, I understand the basics of biochemistry, as a chiropractor, but talking to my family members, like chemists and pharmacists just don't invent chemical structures in a dream or in a vacuum for the drugs and pharmaceuticals that they create. I mean, there are only so many elements on the periodic table.
Hmm.
So let's kind of distill this down. What are we saying here? Every drug on the market has a basis of, at one point or another, based off of the chemical structures that the chemists have seen in plants. And so what they do is they'll get, let's say, limonene is a perfect example. It's an anti-inflammatory shown to kill cancer cells, boost immune. It's an antidepressant. It's the primary component of orange oil and all of the citrus oils. So you have this essential oil. Basically, it's steam distilled from a considerable amount of plant matter. Like you have like 3 pounds of lavender flowers just to get one itty bitty bottle of lavender, right? Or you'll have 40 some rinds, because that's where the citrus oils come from, in the
Hmm.
rind, right? We never cut a lemon or an orange or grapefruit. Your hands are a little greasy. That's the
Hmm.
orange oil. That's the essential oil. It's not in the fruit, right? It's not in the pulp, it's not in the juice. And so you cold press those rinds like you would cold press an olive, like to make olive oil. So whether it's cold pressed citrus oils or steam distilled plant oils like the roots, the barks, the resins like frankincense, or the herbs that we know, flowers like rose, it takes a considerable amount of plant matter, and you steam distill it or cold press it. you'll have hundreds of chemicals in that concoction. And not, when I say chemical, people are like, well, what do you mean chemical? Like plant-based chemicals, like phytochemicals, right? And
Yeah.
so
Okay.
there's a number of them. So in orange oil, there's roughly 150, again, depending on the orange and the species and all that, 150 to 200 different plant chemicals. Limonene is the primary component. So what do chemists do? They do research on, okay, let's extract that limonene, let's fractionate it out, and let's see how this limonene does in studies when it comes to, let's say, pain, when it comes to boosting mood, and when it comes to whatever. Well, then they have that limonene. Oh, wow, this chemical that we've extracted out of nature has an effect. So let's create a drug around it. That's basically the foundation for modern pharmacy. That's why our new book's called The Essential Oils Apothecary, because we're bringing people back to the nature's pharmacy. So all that to say is this is plant-based medicine at its core. And unlike pharmaceuticals that have a profound effect on the body, there are virtually no side effects if you use essential oils the right way. And that's really important. If you follow instructions, and you do, like, please, please, this is one of my big concerns for people, and my biggest complaint, if we can complain for a moment about those thousands of articles on Google about oils. There's like virtually no safety instructions. There's no caution. It's like, oh, whatever you want to do. Who's going to have insomnia? Go to Rite Aid or Walgreens or your local pharmacy, get a over-the-counter sleep aid, and just take a handful of pills without at least looking at the instructions quick, right? At least look at the instructions quick. And that's what we do. And that's what we try to help people, like how to dilute the oil, how to make a capsule, how to properly put it in your diffuser, how to use it in ways that will enhance your life. Because we have seen people transform their health when medicine hasn't done it, when nothing else would work, or simply put, to enhance a lifestyle that they were already enjoying, to enjoy maybe even more abundance, mental health, emotional health, financial health. Like, can I say essential oils can help in every aspect of your life? Yes, because you can start making your own products. You can start saving money on that whole DIY. You remember when the pandemic, like it was a year ago now, literally a year ago today, you could not find hand sanitizer or hand soap on the shelves. Remember
Right.
that? I didn't care. My wife and I didn't care. It didn't bother us. Like we cared in that, oh, wow, this sucks. Like, I can't believe this is happening. But it didn't bother us. We didn't storm the shelves. Why? Because we made our own.
Yeah.
I mean, very simply, we knew how to make our own. And then this notion of being a prepper started, like, wow, it's being a prepper is the new cool thing. Well, that's our way of life. And quite frankly, when you make your own stuff, you know what's in it, you feel a lot better. That opens up a whole new world where you're saving money, it increases your health benefits, and it's a way of life that we've been promoting now for roughly 20 years.
Okay, so your second book, The Essential Oils Apothecary, you were just mentioning,
Yeah.
comes after your bestseller, The Healing Power of Essential Oils, which I see there in the background. Why write another? What changed in this field between your first book and your second?
Unfortunately, nothing changed in the big
Because
scheme of
it's
things.
old. It's old. It's just old ancient medicine.
Well, let me say this. Nothing's changed in the big scheme of things. When you're looking at the primary causes of death, nothing's changed in the last 4 years. If anything, we've gotten a worse situation. My first book is really a great 101. It's like a
Okay.
101 of how to use essential oils, how to do a lot of the things I just shared,
Yeah.
body care, cleaning products. It's a great
Basics.
resource. But what about chronic disease? What about heart disease? What about stroke? What about diabetes, obesity? We are sicker than we ever have been. And unfortunately, things aren't getting better. I mean, they really aren't. And then when you add this pandemic to the mix, this is where really the genius of God behind the whole book became, because the primary concern with comorbidities or chronic infection, chronic disease. So what's putting people at an infinitely higher risk of contracting or dying of the virus? Having having a comorbidity like obesity, heart disease, COPD, um, diabetes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what my book's on.
Mm.
So what I decided to do, and really it was birthed in a lot of prayer, a lot of research, to be like, what is the thing? What are the things that people need right now to truly, truly help them experience an abundant life? And we kept on going back to this chronic disease epidemic, this
Yeah.
pandemic, where the causes of death right now are exceptionally different than what they were 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and 200 years ago. Chronic diseases, we know it didn't even exist. And maybe, yeah, maybe it's a fact that modern medicine couldn't diagnose to the extent. But look at autism. Look at just how autism has just skyrocketed in the last 10 years. Look at just other chronic conditions that when you look at it, like these things just don't start overnight,
Yeah.
right? Chronic conditions, specifically, once you have one, you're going to have another. And the likelihood of having multiple and then being on multiple medications for the rest of your life is pretty much what most people resign to in
Mm-hmm.
in Australia, United Nations, United Kingdom, United States. Like if you live in an industrial society, you are in a chronic disease state. That's just how our nations work. Like half of America is obese at this point. It's going to only get worse until we stop it. And that's where I believe we could stop it by looking at some of the root causes and the root mechanisms. And we can talk a little bit about the difference between the two, but I'll leave everyone with this. A root mechanism that's a commonality in all chronic conditions is inflammation. And it's become a buzzword. It's mainstream now in a good way. I'm glad people weren't talking about inflammation 20 years ago, but that is the mechanism of the body, this inflammatory, this fight or flight sympathetic nervous system state that wears down you and me at the cellular level. That's really what's causing Alzheimer's and dementia to just continue to skyrocket. It's neurological brain inflammation caused
Yeah.
by the chemicals that we breathe, caused by the foods that we eat, caused by chronic stress and anxiety that we cannot manage.
Right.
I mean, so, but what's causing inflammation though? See, that's where my wife and I are helping people approach life a little differently. Where now it is a matter of, okay, really, what are you inhaling? How are you stimulating the olfactory system?
Mm-hmm.
What are you consuming? How are you managing the trauma that we've all gone through in the last year and a half? And if you look at these causes, linking to the mechanism of inflammation, you see, and this is a commonality of all chronic disease, they're largely preventable. And this is straight from the World Health Organization, the CDC, the Australian Medical Association, all major governments, major institutions all agree. Chronic diseases are largely preventable, largely treatable, and they start at a very young age. And
Mm-hmm.
it's essentially wear and tear of the body until the body's like, I can't do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone starts to develop even hypertension, right now you're at an infinitely higher risk of stroke and heart attack, whatever it might be. We think, oh, cancer. Well, cancer just didn't start yesterday,
Yeah.
right? And so what we're trying to do is give people what the literature says about plant-based medicine. And believe it or not, there are thousands of research trials that have been done over the last 2 decades about how plant-based medicine, specifically essential oils, can help with not only those root causes of inflammation, the inflammation itself, but also how to manage and treat the symptoms of these chronic conditions. And it's essentially the reason why we wrote the book is because it's never been done. There is no book out there for like the non-medical professional. We call, my neighbor, the layperson. There's no book out there for the layperson that addresses chronic disease.
Yeah.
And there's certainly no book on how to use essential oils specifically. And so it was one of those like, it's kind of crazy to think we could be in 2021 and there's still like a lot of things. I mean, you know what I mean? Like there, if you went in, I'm speaking to the inventor out there, I'm speaking to the artist out there. You have a gift, right? We have a unique look on life. We have a unique aspect of how to see things. there is a lot of opportunity for people to, there is so much room for cutting edge, you know? It's not like we can rest on our laurels and we're like, oh, that's already been done. No, I'm already thinking about the next book and this one isn't even done yet. So I'm so excited about that. But anyway, um, I want people to realize, and I hope people recognize that regardless of what it is that they're battling in their health,
Mhm.
they are not, we are not, I am not, you are not a victim of our circumstances, and we're not a victim of our genetic lottery. We have a lot more control than what we think. And for us, that's where I go to essential oils, and that's where I go to natural therapies.
Um, well, a lot of the chronic conditions in our audience that you're speaking to are autism, like you said,
Yeah.
and the ADD and ADHD, and those rates are just skyrocketing, and childhood cancer, um, and traumatic brain injury.
Yep.
How, gosh, if you've named so many different oils and that I've never heard of, but I also heard a little bit of, treating symptoms, but what are some ways that, or to speaking to our audience, that
Mm-hmm.
you can get to the root causes of any of those? Because I'm sitting here thinking, I believe that there's just so many reasons for these things, like it's not just one reason that these things happened. And then a child ended up with
Yep.
cancer or autism.
Now,
So how do you get
essential
to
oils are
that?
nootropics. Have you had anyone on the show talk about nootropics yet?
Uh-uh.
Okay, smart drugs. So, I'm going to quote you something. This is from my book. I want to quote you something because I have a chapter on Alzheimer's and dementia,
Mm.
which again, I know this isn't for it. Just listen to it with an open mind in that we're talking about brain and cognitive capacity. We're
Yeah.
talking about the reality that very few drugs can successfully pass through the blood-brain barrier has been a huge burden in just cancer treatments and in other disorders that involve the brain, especially traumatic brain injury and concussion. Essential oils, especially the chemicals known as sesquiterpenes, they can and have been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier. Like that's really the genius behind plant-based medicine. Like essential oils are lipophilic. They're fat-loving, hydrophobic, water-hating, volatile organic compounds. Volatile meaning they readily evaporate. Organic meaning they're carbon-based. Compounds meaning they're a variety of different molecules. Like we had just said, anywhere from 150 to 200 different plant-based chemicals combined. So when you have this group of chemicals known as sesquiterpenes that can cross the blood-brain barrier, that has led some people to use oils like frankincense, for example, to help with cerebral edema. And that's a big concern for people with brain cancer or anyone going through radiation or just had some sort of surgery. And other people have used frankincense oil again as a treatment for brain tumors. And I actually have a close friend of mine, Allison Hewish, who, at the point where she was in her childhood, it was frankincense oil that she believes that helped her get through a brain tumor that nothing else would help her go through. It was neuroblastoma. And so that's not as aggressive as a glioblastoma. But for parents that have children with tumors, something to consider, like imagine giving your child a little, back of scalp kind of occiput, neck rub with some highly diluted essential oils as a great way of just oxygenating the blood, helping
Mm.
create some because they're all rich in antioxidants, right? Some
Mm.
antioxidant rich volatile organic compounds. But here's a quote that talks about how essential oils can help with overall brain function and brain health. But this was in the context of Alzheimer's. Excuse me.
Okay.
A recent literature review sums it up. And I guess this kind of just highlights why we're even here and why it warranted an entire chapter of my upcoming book. Essential oils are effective against almost all currently known pathological targets of Alzheimer's. I mean, that's worthwhile to repeat. Again, this is a literature review done by independent researchers to look at all the available medical studies on essential oils and Alzheimer's and dementia. And they quoted, and they're concluding that essential oils are effective against almost all current known pathological targets of Alzheimer's. Essential oils possess neuroprotective, anti-aging potentials. They're effective in dementia, epilepsy, anxiety, and other neurological disorders. Again, how many children watching right now, or how many parents watching right now have children that are epileptic? You know,
A lot.
right? Special focus. And actually, I have a chapter in my book on Parkinson's and epilepsy. Special focus must be given on the edible essential oils, according to these researchers, which should either be part of the diet or used as spices to be more useful for the brain. So essentially what they're saying are essential oils are actually referred to as nootropics. They are cognitive enhancers. They're smart drugs, right? So a nootropic can be an actual pharmaceutical, a supplement, or a substance, any substance that can improve cognitive function like memory, creativity, or motivation. This is where now I'm going to segue into ADHD and autism,
Yeah.
because studies have shown how oils like vetiver essential oil can actually help children focus more. Again, this was a small pilot study of, I think, forgive me, 24, 25 children, but they did pre and post evaluation. They had the children do schoolwork, the other cognitive function, and they found
Right.
that diffusing vetiver essential oil helps kids focus, children with ADHD. And
Wow.
so when you have a drug that essentially hacks into the system to produce a desired response, oftentimes what these drugs do is they have a variety of different mechanisms that produce, whether it's acetylcholine, which is a main thing for Alzheimer's patients, is Alzheimer's patients lack acetylcholine, so they have a drug that prevents acetylcholine from breaking down, because you need acetylcholine for neurotransmitter interaction. That
Okay.
is what keeps you functioning. That's what keeps your brain and your memory and everything working, right? So if you don't have that working, if you don't have that hormone acetylcholine, that neurotransmitter in full-fledged, essentially in full-fledged focus mode, then people start to kind of just, and we're seeing the same sort of thing in children that are having any neurocognitive disorder. Like there's at the core an emotional disturbance that is caused by a physical damage. Like there's something not working, whether it's a neurotransmitter that's not being produced properly, or a hormone that's not being produced properly. So a pharmaceutical approach to like prevent the body from doing what the body's doing, or hack the body into doing something that it doesn't want to do, which can have a desired response. But that's why a lot of kids just feel doped. They feel doped down. They feel doped up, or however they feel numb. The problem with a lot of these neurocognitive and antipsychotic drugs, like for the depression, anxiety, and panic, it literally just numbs you to the core.
Right.
It takes away the highs and the lows, and it just gives you at this even keel, which is like, you know, I don't know,
I think, isn't that called apathy?
yeah, it's a dangerous place. It's a
Yeah.
dangerous place to be in that gray zone, to be in that you, like you mentioned, apathetic. But it's like we need the experience of the highs and lows of life.
Yeah.
We need to go enjoy sunlight. It's nice to have rain once in a while, just so we're
Yeah.
like, oh wow, that's really beautiful. Like, wow, what a beautiful day. Like I was talking before we got on the phone. So all that to say is that imagine something that you could give to your children, or you could take yourself, that maybe we could kind of segue into the olfactory system for a minute, that taps in to the olfactory system to
Yeah.
automatically stimulate your brain, because no other system in the body has a direct, unrelayed, and I'll explain in a minute, direct, uninhibited response to the brain. Like when you hurt yourself, there is a slight delay between when you actually hurt yourself, like cut yourself, and when your brain senses the pain. Is because the sensation has to be interpreted in the thalamic relay centers of the brain. Same thing for every other system, your heart rate, your breathing rate, everything. I mean, your body has checks and balances, and the brain needs to interpret. It's actually a wonderful defense mechanism, so you're not overloaded with too much stimuli. Not so much with the olfactory system, though. The olfactory system is what is our most primal brain. It's the newly developed brain. It's what first develops in your body when you are in utero, and it's where your mood, your emotions, um, your limbic system can be directly affected, which controls your autonomic function, your heart rate, your breathing rate, all that through olfaction. So when you breathe something, there is no thalamic relay, there is no interpretation. You breathe something, the stimuli goes directly to your brain immediately. And why that's important is because of the toxins that are constantly around us,
Mhm.
constantly being bombarding our olfactory sensation that's telling our brain, hey, there's something wrong here. What that's doing is creating this like low grade neurological chronic
Yeah.
inflammation.
Yeah.
And so, what's the solution? Well, to stop that stuff, meaning stop the bleeding, so to speak. It's meaning if you have an aerosol or a plug-in or a poo-poo spray that you like to use or a chemical cleaner that just that has synthetic fragrances, these have been shown clinically. Synthetic fragrances have been shown clinically to be linked to Alzheimer's, dementia, ADHD, autism, cancer, autoimmune conditions. Why? Because we're breathing them in all day long and there's no protection. There's no way that the body can like clean this stuff out. The only way is to kick it out. And that's why I use my diffusers. That's why we don't have any of that stuff in my home. That's why we make our own. So we have helped a lot of people, especially with their children, reset the button. Meaning, you know what? If you want to see how your child responds to noxious stimuli, it's called noxious toxic stimuli. Like think of artificial fragrances like you do the virus that everyone's afraid of right now. It's like this invisible thing in the air. That's the importance when everyone recognized that coronavirus was airborne. Now they started speaking my language because what I've been doing is fighting against airborne pathogens since my career started, because this is what I see as an airborne pathogen. Yeah, it's not a fungi or virus or bacteria, but it's a noxious chemical that produces inflammation in the brain that could cause a number of horrible conditions, including depression, anxiety, all the things that wreck people's lives today, overwhelm. So if you're looking at, airborne particles in the air, if you're willing, if you're doing things to protect your family from an airborne virus, just use that mentality like how you would to protect your family from airborne chemicals. And that's where getting an air purifier is so important. Throwing away all those toxic chemicals, including your perfumes, your body care. You try
Yeah.
something. And I want to challenge parents for a minute. Anyone with children with autism, anyone with children with ADHD or even especially asthma, parents with autism usually find this really quick. You press pause on all your synthetic fragrances, including your own perfume, right? Your own cologne, because that could trigger a lot of things. Imagine just having more of like a scent-free environment and see what happens to your child's behavior. Markedly, you should see an improvement, like literally overnight, if you have a lot of the chemicals, your candles, and all those things. And then if you see an improvement, start to incorporate some essential oils that can produce good mood, like the citrus oils, or maybe some oils like Roman chamomile or lavender to help them sleep at night, or some oils like I mentioned, frankincense or vetiver, myrrh, copaiba, any of the tree oils to help with focus, meditation, cognitive function while they're doing their schoolwork. You should see a dramatic improvement in them. And some parents, and myself included, because I'm a parent of five, we have five children, we'll see like an immediate reaction in the kids in how we create an environment around them with what we use with aromatherapy. So bringing it to a relevant discussion to your community is important because when you're looking at especially cognitive adolescent concerns, those mental
Mhm.
concerns, those emotional issues that are plaguing our kids, oftentimes it starts with what they're breathing.
Right. You touched on so many different things. I'm thinking about also um, some of the products. I feel like we can clean up our homes and get rid of all these, big ones, the candles and the diffusers and the scented sprays for cleaning and everything. But it's also in everywhere. All of our upholstered products, our clothing, our mattresses, which we sleep on. So I was just thinking about how it's important to get clean as much as possible, because you really, in this modern world, it's hard to be completely clean. So it's always going to be, we're filling up our bucket full of chemicals a little bit here in the modern lifestyle. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, you make a good point of over sanitation. Now, let's clarify. We want to avoid chemicals. That's a big difference.
The
Like you mentioned,
synthetic ones.
yes, right. And shameless plug for a friend of mine who owns a non-toxic laundry product company called My Green Fills. Check it out. Or you can go to my website at naturallivingfamily.com, type up My Green Fills, but it's completely plant-based, non-toxic laundry wash that actually
Yeah.
works.
Oh, yeah.
It works. So that's the solution for your clothes issue. When it comes to the VOCs in your carpet and in your upholstery and things, like, I'll just tell you, there's a level where some people can be absolutely obsessed with, like, it's everywhere. What am I going to do? And they live in a hazmat suit in a bubble. I mean, having a good air purifier, like I recommend an Air Doctor. It's an affordable,
Yeah.
portable air
We saw that on
purifier.
our site.
Perfect. So go to your site and get one, because now this is why Air Doctor is so important. You can control what's in your carpet. Hopefully you have, like I have, a non-toxic bed. We buy the non-toxic versions of things, and
Mhm.
but for those people who can't afford it, because sometimes it can be a little costly, or you are renting a home or an apartment
Yeah.
and you're just at the mercy of your landlord, have an air purifier, because now at least you could get the bad VOCs out
Yeah.
in the air. But the reality is, if I had to choose between Clorox cleanup or an essential oil based with vinegar and water, I'm going to choose the essential oil based with vinegar and water
Mhm.
every time. And the same thing with my body care. Like, I don't use the Armani colognes anymore. Like, I can't even stomach it. It gives me a headache.
Mhm.
My cologne, my wife's perfume, we use essential oils, and the same thing with our body care. But you mentioned essentially what your concern is, which is a valid concern. We can't be obsessed with sanitation.
I didn't mean that.
Right. Well, I want to say that because well,
I
that makes,
agree, though.
but that's key, because that's been linked to Alzheimer's. Hyper sanitized developed countries have a higher rate of
Oh,
Alzheimer's and
interesting.
dementia. So what does
Wasn't
that
that
mean?
linked to a lot of things?
Yeah,
Because we're
because there's no
destroying our
bacteria.
microbiome.
Exactly. And on the microbiome, on the skin and the brain, it's all connected.
I know. It's a tough time right now.
Well, it's a healthy balance, though. I mean, really, here's the encouragement thing. It's a healthy balance. And that's a beautiful thing, because essential oils, because they're made in nature, they have what's known as cell selectivity. I mean, crazy as it sounds, I quote a study in my cancer chapter about how certain essential oils have been studied in vitro, right? Cells in a petri dish, and the essential oils will kill the cancer cells, but they'll leave the human non-cancer cells alone. It's like,
Interesting.
it's the difference between an antibiotic, let's kill everything approach, to, oh, okay, we just, essentially, nature knows how to interact with viruses, bacteria, and fungi. And that's what our body is, a collection of viruses, bacteria, and
Yeah.
fungi, right?
A living, breathing landscape, changing all the time.
And essential oils won't hurt that. That's the key. They're all antimicrobial, but they target the pathogenic ones. That's why, going back to the quote I talked about earlier about oils being nootropics, especially for Alzheimer's patients, for every known pathological link, that's the benefit to all this stuff. So
Mhm.
the fun thing is, now it could be like, whoa, overwhelming. Here's the fear I want to put in people. Like, if there's a fear that would drive us to be motivated to change, is, no joke, synthetic fragrances are deadly. And if you can walk into Michael's arts and crafts or Bath and Body Works, if you could go in that environment and not have a symptom, that means your sense of smell has been dampened. That's actually a red flag. That's like diabetic neuropathy where you can't feel your feet anymore and the concern is getting
Symptom
infection.
meaning can't smell something?
No, if you walk into a store like that has filled with synthetic fragrance, if you don't get a headache, nausea, runny nose, if you don't sneeze, if you don't feel like, ugh, this is bad, that is your sense of smell not working properly.
Okay.
Right? So this
I
is
will.
important.
I want to ask you,
Yes.
going back to the sense of smell, you talked a little bit about that briefly.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me, so when my son Carter was with us, I used to work on tastes and smells because I learned that that helps with memory.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that at all? Because no one
Yeah.
has shared about that really. And I think that
Yeah.
you're probably an expert in that
Well,
area,
it's well
the
the
smells.
the olfactory system. So when you smell something, there's and again, taste is connected to smell. I can only speak to taste. I'm sorry, I can only speak to smell.
Right.
But which again is connected. So when you are smelling something, so when you put your nose into a rose blossom and you smell like in springtime, there are volatile organic compounds being emitted, like literally volatile evaporating compounds being emitted from the rose that are physical. There's actually like a physical component. They're not invisible. Okay, that's important because those particles stimulate your olfactory nerves in your nose. And what happens is there's immediately a signal that goes right to your limbic system. That is the memory, your mood, your emotions, your autonomic function. That's why when you smell a rose, and let's say you have a wonderful memory of your husband courting you, giving you roses, and it reminds you, oh, it reminds me of Steve, or reminds me of Jill. It's like, that's why when you smell Thanksgiving dinner, it reminds you of maybe, hopefully, good memories
Or
or
not.
Christmas cookies or not. That's the key, or not. I'm glad you said that because there is the or not
Yeah.
aspect of it
Yeah.
too. But the reality is you will remember because again, there's no thalamic relay. There is no interpretation of it. It's like immediate memory, immediate emotion. So you could stimulate the exact emotions that you were experiencing at that moment when you smelled rose for the first time or when you were at Thanksgiving dinner. That's why some people, when they smell certain smells, they automatically get agitated because they had a traumatic experience around a special aroma. Like, let's say you had a horrible family upbringing and Thanksgiving was traumatic for you, and Thanksgiving dinner might give you a traumatic feeling that you literally will feel. Like muscle memory for weightlifters that say, oh yeah, I didn't work out for 2 years. I went back and I got right back into it because your body is muscle memory. That's the memory of the brain. So that's really the key if you want to stimulate memory. And the thing for people that are going through healing, if people are going through emotional recall healing specifically and other healing mechanisms where they're going back, if you use an essential oil as an anchor during therapy sessions, and if the therapy sessions are good and
Yeah.
worthwhile, that will serve you the rest of your life. So that maybe, let's say 4 or 5 years from now, you may have a relapse or something happens where it's like, oh man, I just, you get back to your oil, you get back to the practice your therapist taught you, and you're right there in the room with them healing. And that's something that we try to walk people through, which is why we teach about abuse and trauma. Like in our book, we actually cover exceptional amount of information on addiction because I have that background. And we want to let people know that there's a huge emotional and memory component to addiction. And so you could use essential oils to help ease those symptoms, but also like literally satisfy the addiction cascade so you don't have withdrawals. Like your withdrawals aren't as profound. So again, this might sound crazy to people, but don't drugs sound crazy? I mean, no joke. Think about this. Doesn't it sound crazy? You could take a pill and this pill will lower your blood pressure. Doesn't it sound crazy? You could take a pill and the pill will do this. You're saying a pill is going to kill cancer cells in my blood? Well, that's what chemotherapy is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really, you know what I mean? So I want to enlighten people to just always remember plant-based medicine was first. Now pharmaceutical medicine is essentially the evolution of plant-based medicine. And if people are looking for a non-toxic variety of it, that's my world.
Right. Yeah. And I can just think of in the most recent years, people have been using cannabis for medicinal purposes, and
Mhm.
then they made it into a synthetic,
Yeah.
right? Just
Yep.
like everything else.
Yep.
So you
So
can take the natural or the synthetic.
no, 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 no. Good call. Don't take the synthetic, please. Here's the knockoff. Um, in the oil world, in the
No,
oil
I
world,
wasn't saying you should take it. I'm saying
yeah,
people
yeah,
do have a choice to
yeah,
take the natural, or I wasn't suggesting to take
yeah.
this, and that's not me.
But most on the market are though. That's what you're saying
Yes.
is people don't
Yeah.
realize this. I actually have a whole section on cannabis too, because a lot of people use cannabis with essential oils. So in the
Right.
essential oils apothecary, I explain how they work together. But here's a concern: like up to 80+% of all CBD on the market is
Yes.
adulterated or fake or synthetic.
Right.
Same thing with essential oils, because people are just knocking it off and people are
I
creating
wanted
bad.
to know about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So you talked a bit about the importance of safety,
Yeah.
and the lack thereof, on many websites that are teaching people how to use essential oils.
Hmm.
What are some of your number one, safety things? I assume buying organic essential
Oh,
oils, or
no, actually, that's probably one of the biggest misnomers is that organic isn't necessary. I would prefer indigenous, like organic in nature, because there was a study in 2014 in Rome. Actually, not a study; there was a conference. It was an aromatherapy conference, and they evaluated specifically citrus essential oils.
okay.
Going back, what, almost 45 minutes ago or so. Remember when I said citrus oils are extracted from the rind?
Yes.
So imagine this. Imagine you have a citrus grove that's completely organic, but you have a neighbor maybe 20 miles down the road known as Monsanto, or another neighbor that's spraying, right? So what they're finding is pesticide residue in citrus oils, in organic citrus oils, and there's just no way of extracting that out, like that little pesticide residue.
Right.
So all that to say, organic isn't bad, but it's the best: being out in nature, 100, 200 miles away from any other farm.
But how do you know where to get those oils?
Well, I explain it in the book, like how to find oil, um, how to vet out a company. It's really something where it's a little bit of step by step. But here's the bottom line with that: like the quick and easy version of it is transparency is a big word in a lot of areas right now of life, and that's especially a big word in aromatherapy. And so when you're going to buy a product, let's say orange oil, you should see the batch specific GCMS, which is known as the gas chromatography mass spectrometry report, right on the website. What is that? It's essentially the blood panel. It's just like getting a heart disease risk factor test at the local readylab.com, and then having them give you, okay, here's your heart disease risk factors, your blood pressure, your hormone levels, whatever. It's not like you're a cardiologist. It's not like they expect you to understand detail, but they give you within normal limits, without normal limits. So what the GCMS is, it's basically a biochemistry report that tells you if there are adulterants, chemicals, or anything that shouldn't be in there.
Right.
And a company is paying their own money to have their products third party tested, and then they're putting the test out there. So there's a level of, you know, who's going to do that unless their product's good, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So you're
Hmm.
not seeing a lot of companies that don't have good products transparently saying, hey, here's what's behind the curtain, right?
Right.
Because there is no ingredient label that's necessary. You don't know everything that's on it, And so anyway, that's how you find out, really, at the end of the day. And there are a lot of companies, and I'll say this: there are several really good companies that sell really good oils, but organic isn't necessary. But when you say safety, I think one thing I want to leave people with: dilute, dilute with a
Yeah.
carrier oil. Like literally for 99% of your topical use, you really ever just want to put a drop right on your skin.
Okay.
They're highly concentrated plant-based compounds. Like if you especially use like oregano,
Oh yeah.
cassia, or cinnamon, you could burn your skin. They're caustic. So using a fatty oil, like a fatty vegetable oil, like olive oil, grapeseed oil, coconut oil, the traditional oils, again, we cover all this in my book.
Mhm.
Jojoba, sweet almond, like those are the traditional aromatherapy oils. But having a fatty substance that you mix with the essential oil first, then
Mhm.
protects your skin. And
Mm.
then essentially now you could create this is as easy. If you want a little recipe for people, it's super easy. Get a tablespoon of coconut oil. And I would recommend unrefined coconut oil, extra
Okay.
virgin if you can get it. If you can get some good, healthy coconut oil, just put 6 drops. 6 drops of, let's say, a sleepy thyme, lavender, wonderful smelling oil, and just give your son or daughter a nice neck and a back and a foot rub, like my wife literally does every night to our children, and have
Oh.
that be part of like your nighttime routine. and and if your child is autistic or struggles with just agitation, and sleep is an issue, which oftentimes is for kids with ADHD or whatever it might be that's really bothering them, maybe being bullied at school, like a lot of things affect kids sleep,
Anxiety.
right? Anxiety. Try that. And that's safe, that's diluted, and just 6 drops, right? So now one bottle will last you weeks,
Mhm.
right? That's how you save money on this. But that also will replace the melatonin or maybe some sleep aid you might be having them take, because I'll tell you, we don't want to develop habits.
Mhm.
On a side note, there's zero research to suggest that essential oils are habit forming or you develop resistance to them. Like, that's pretty cool, because when you're looking at infections like MRSA, which are antibiotic resistant bacteria, essential
Mhm.
oils can kill that. Like they've
Mm.
shown, like oregano, lemongrass, thyme oil. So there's no resistance, there's no habit forming, and you could use something like this every night. And I would say start there, and then
Mm.
maybe flip it on its head. Well, okay, well, how do we wake up in the morning? Well, what we do is we like orange oil and a little bit of vanilla. We love that smell. And vanilla and orange has actually been shown clinically. I quote the study in my book that it's beautiful because it put people into a helpless, hopeless situation in a study. Like, imagine, like, how hard up do you have to be for $50 to participate, to be a research subject for a study that's going to put you in a hopeless situation? Like, God bless research participants, by the way. So these people willingly put themselves in a hopeless, helpless
Oh my
situation.
gosh.
But here's what it was. Here's what it was. How coincidental, how timely. They were asked to solve an unsolvable social discrimination task, like solve racism in 10 minutes. And they're like, with a timer and pressure and all this stuff. And they're like, well, I can't do this. They became hopeless. They became helpless. And they monitored, okay, how do you feel? Well, here's what they did. They had a control group that they just, God bless them, put them in a room and let them deal with it. And then they had the aromatherapy group where they put orange and vanilla essential
Vanilla.
oil. And guess what? They felt happier because
Mm.
the aroma, because it's proven antidepressant, started producing like happy hormones, serotonin, dopamine, started balancing some of the anxiety of the hopelessness. They actually performed better on the test. They didn't feel as hopeless. They didn't feel as helpless,
Mhm.
and they were more empowered. And the more that they enjoyed the smell, the better they were able to deal with that. When you
Mm.
send your kid off to school, is your son or daughter virtual schooling right now? And when
No.
they push yes on Zoom, many people are, but when they push yes, I'm starting on Zoom, do they automatically feel hopeless? Like, oh, today's going to suck, or wow, this is bad, or they feel helpless that I'm not going to get the education or the experience I need in life? Because a lot of kids are right now. Imagine listening and you're like, wow, what can I do for my child? Well, literally get some orange essential oil, get some vanilla absolute, not vanilla extract. You're not getting McCormick's here. Like, we're getting like aromatherapy version of it. Put that a couple drops in your diffuser. Let that just go in the background and let your kid do what your kid normally does. And I'll tell you something, at the physiological level, things will change in their brain.
Mhm.
It's proven. Like, you cannot not do it. It's like a reflex. Things will start. And I hope that they were receptive to it and that they allow themselves to really enjoy it, because if they do, this could completely help transform how they're interacting, not only online but just in general. right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm with you. Our kids go to school, thank God, completely normal. And we have a wonderful little bubble that we live in Georgia, but we know we have friends that don't have that ability right now
A
around
lot
the
of
world.
people.
And so we're giving our friends and our natural living family online all these little tips like, okay, how do we thrive? And I'll tell you, last year, again, it was almost a year ago today, we were forced, everything was shut down soon, like right first week of April in Georgia here. And it was hard. Like now having to homeschool and virtual school for kids with a baby on the way, which we're not homeschool people. Like, well, it was like, so we got all these little tricks. We had all, I'm kidding. It was like we were overdosing on the diffusers. We had our routine. We made sure they were outside getting the fresh air, which is so important. Please, please get outside your cardboard box a little bit. Before the pandemic, we were spending 93% collectively of our time indoors. Now, I don't have the most recent research because it hasn't been done yet, but I'll pretty much guarantee you it's almost 100. I mean, like, look, most people are spending
Yeah.
collectively 98 to 99% of their time inside all day long. Get outside. And even if it's raining, just get an umbrella, breathe. Oh, that's actually wonderful. The fresh negative ions, the aromatherapy. When you put yourself in nature, if you have a park nearby, or just try the best you can. Try the best you can to surround yourself with plants and be outside in an environment where you can get the natural aromatherapy. Because when you're walking in a forest and you smell those subtle smells, when you cut your grass and you smell the fresh mown grass, what do you think that is? That's the essential oil being emitted from the freshly cut grass. That's the aroma from the
Wow.
trees that are being emitted when
Never
you're
thought
walking
of
at a
that.
forest. Again, neither did I until I wrote this book and it hit me. And I was like, man, I got to get out of this box. Like, no joke. When the pandemic hit and everyone was stuck inside, forced inside, right? I was like, I was craving. I can't prove it. I can never say we're like essential oil deficient, like we might be vitamin D deficient, but I craved being outside, craved it. So I found myself naturally drawn to the fir oils, the woods oils, the resins, the oils like cedarwood, sandalwood, Douglas fir, silver fir, pine, frankincense, myrrh, copaiba, those oils that come from trees. I
Mm-hmm.
was just intuitively drawn to it because I used to spend a lot more time outside. And I was like, my mood, my emotions, my memory was craving that.
Okay, I don't want, sometimes I feel like my questions might be silly, but okay, I burn sandalwood sometimes.
Mhm.
Is that totally different?
Yes, it's completely different. That's incense. And that's a wonderful practice that our ancestors did before essential oils were distilled. Hey, on a side note, don't believe what you're reading online. Essential oils, as we know it, didn't exist like 2,000 years ago. They didn't have steam distillation, right? So steam
Right.
distillation wasn't invented till 9th century AD by Arab alchemists. So what our ancestors used to do was they used to, right? Did
Grind.
you
No,
catch
oh
that?
no, I was gonna say like muddle, muddle it. I
Yeah,
wasn't
they
trying.
used to. Yeah, they used to make salves. Basically, the first recipe we see, one of the first in ancient scriptures or in history is the Jewish ancient scripture when God told Moses, get this big old vat of olive oil, put myrrh, put cassia, put cinnamon and aloe, and let it just soak. That was the anointing oil. And
Mhm.
then God told Moses a recipe how to make an herbal extract. That's what they used. So, so when you're
Right.
looking at, again, they didn't have essential oils like we know them today. The
Yeah.
essential oils we have now are infinitely more potent than any herbal extract you could get by allowing myrrh resin to soak. But like you said, our ancestors would crush them, create poultices and salves, or they would burn the resin, or they would burn whatever it might be, the wood, and they would have incense from it. All of it is part of the aromatherapy world. But what
Okay.
we have now is very
Medicinal.
unique, extremely new in the timeline of humanity. And to your point, exceptionally therapeutic and medicinal. And so that's why we need to have a little bit of care in how we use it, which
Yeah,
is
because they're
essentially,
more potent.
yeah, that's it. We don't want people to hurt themselves. So
Yeah.
we, we've given a lot of little tidbits to a lot of little things. And I would
Yeah.
love, is there anything, I'm just curious, like, is there something I kind of glossed over? Because I talked about sleep and mood and focus. We talked about all kinds of stuff. Is there something maybe where you feel I need to,
Thank
really
you for
drive home?
asking.
Yeah.
No, I think that we touched on a lot of topics and I don't want to overwhelm everyone. But I think your book sounds amazing and like that would really kind of bring this all home
Mm.
looking through there and finding um, different, I assume it's kind of like the different chapters and you can find what interests you and your children. Um, I think I want to ask you, is there anything else that you would like to share with our Brain Possible community to be complete?
The only other thing I have is just an invitation to dive deeper with me. My new book, The Essential Oils Apothecary, comes out in September. And for people that go to eoapothecary.com right now, eoapothecary.com, if you want to join the waiting list to be the first to know when the book comes out, I put together, which is very fitting for your community, a mental health guide and how to use essential oils. And so it's roughly like 140 pages
Wow.
of yeah, it's kind of like a book, but it's a great little ebook to
Mhm.
get you started while you wait for the essential oils apothecary to come. And it includes just a nice overview of a variety of different oils that have been known traditionally, but also according to the research that can help mental health, and
Mhm.
that recipes, everything from an anti stress or mood boosting, depression busting, anxiety busting roll on. Like there's several
Yeah.
of those to helping specifically recipes that we've formulated for children with ADHD and ADD. That, by the way, that used to be my wife's platform. On a side note, my wife competed in the Miss Michigan circuit when she was younger, and ADHD, ADD. She was forgive me, I don't know the Chad. She was I forget what she was, like not a regional director, but she volunteered with the CHAD organization, and her platform was to bring awareness. This was before people were really talking much about
Mhm.
ADD, ADHD, and especially natural therapies. And she was on Ritalin and all the other drugs that she had, and it didn't help her to a large extent. And it took. So anyway, to um, we're very much open to the pain that causes, and that causes the family and the teachers and the whole system. And
Mhm.
so we're trying to help that. So that mental health book, go eoapothecary.com, and let's just learn together and keep me in the loop. Let me know if you have any questions, and send me an email, and we'll keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Z. It was a pleasure, and I feel like I just learned a lot, and I can't wait to dive back in. Actually, haven't been using my essential oils that like regularly in a
Mm.
while. I moved, and it was all boxed up, and haven't pulled it out, and I need it now, I think. And I'm going to start doing that orange and vanilla in the morning for my kids.
You're going to love it.